Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're going to zoom in on one single, really pivotal day in the life of a software project called Woodbury. That day is March 21st, 2026. Now, it might just look like another date in a long list of commits, but trust me, it represents a massive shift in the project's DNA. We're going to unpack the whole story of this huge refactor, what led to it, how they pulled it off, and why it ended up changing, well, pretty much everything.
So here it is in a nutshell, the before and after. On the left, you've got all this complex code for a feature called pipelines just tangled up right inside the main Woodbury system. And then on the right, boom, the after. That exact same logic has been ripped out and moved into its own separate self-contained home. You have to ask, what on earth could make a team do something so drastic?
And just look at the sheer scale of this. Seriously, we're not talking about a minor spring cleaning here. On that one day, March 21st, a single file in the core system had over 1,500 lines of code surgically removed. That isn't a tweak, it's an amputation. And it's a crystal clear signal that something had finally reached its breaking point.
Yeah, a huge piece of the system was basically extracted and replaced. But you know, the real story here doesn't actually start on March 21st. To get why this major surgery was so absolutely necessary, we've got to rewind the tape and see what was happening in the days leading up to it.
You see, the root cause wasn't some big bug or a terrible mistake. The irony is, it was the project's own incredible success. The team was shipping new features so fast that the architecture itself just couldn't handle the strain anymore. Their speed was creating a problem that just wasn't sustainable.
And this timeline just shows how insane the pace was. Look at this. March 19th, a massive UI migration. The very next day, a complete overhaul of the core data model. I mean, these are huge, fundamental changes happening back to back. All that pressure was making the big refactor on the 21st not just a good idea, it was an absolute necessity.
And if you want some perspective on the scale of change that week, get this. On March 20th, during that UI migration, a single JavaScript file with more than 6,000 lines of code was just gone, deleted, wiped from existence. That's the sign of a project moving at light speed, tearing down old stuff to build new things almost overnight.
So the system was basically growing in this really chaotic way. The best analogy is to think of a city that gets obsessed with building shiny new skyscrapers. They're adding features and UIs at a breakneck pace, but they totally forgot to upgrade the roads. And what happens? The core infrastructure gets clogged, creating these massive traffic jams that make everything slower and way more complicated. This is classic technical debt in action.
But here's the twist in the story. This big refactor on the 21st wasn't just some panicked reaction to all the chaos. Nope. It was actually the final step in a very deliberate, strategic shift in thinking that was already happening, a move away from just adding more features toward defining clear, stable contracts between all the different parts of the system.
And we know this because it's right there in the project's own changelog from the week before. It says, the net effect is that the repo shifted from feature accumulation towards stronger contracts. That quote is everything. It shows they already knew what the problem was. They realized they had to stop just piling on more stuff and start building a stronger foundation.
So, let's go back to our city metaphor. This proves the Great Refactor wasn't an emergency pothole fix. It was the moment the city planners finally said, okay, enough with the random skyscrapers. It's time to design and build a modern, efficient highway system. This was a proactive move, a sign of maturity, not a reaction to failure.
Okay, so with all that context, let's jump back to March 21st and break down the really elegant solution they came up with. This new pipeline extension system is basically the superhighway that finally solved all those traffic jams.
So how does it work? Well, it's a three-step process. First, they define a really clear contract, like a set of rules, using an STK. This tells every pipeline exactly how it has to behave. Second, a factory system automatically finds and loads a pipeline's code only when it's needed. And third, the core system just delegates requests. It basically passes the message along to the right pipeline instead of trying to do all the work itself. And that brings us to the core concept, dynamic delegation. This is the real magic behind the whole thing. Before, the Woodbury core needed to know every little detail about every single pipeline. Now, it knows almost nothing about them. It just sees a request come in, and it basically says, hey, that's not my job, and passes it directly over to that pipeline's own separate dedicated code.
So what was the impact of all this? I mean, it was profound.
This was so much more than a code cleanup. It fundamentally changed the very definition of what a pipeline even is inside the Woodbury world.
And the amazing thing is that the benefits of this new model helped out literally everyone. For the core team, the main code base got way simpler now that pipelines were self-contained. For the pipeline developers, they could suddenly build and update their code on their own time, which meant they could iterate so much faster. And, maybe most importantly for us, the end users, this allowed for these incredibly rich custom user interfaces for each pipeline, since that UI code wasn't trapped in the core system anymore.
And this is the ultimate takeaway, the most important point. The refactor on March 21st turned pipelines from just another feature inside the Woodbury application into their own standalone applications that are simply powered by the Woodbury platform. They're not just tenants in a big building anymore. They're now the owners of their own property.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. This whole story isn't just about Woodbury, right? It's a pattern you see in all kinds of successful software. What happens when the features you build become so powerful, so complex, that they start demanding to become platforms in their own right? It's a sign of incredible growth, but as we just saw, it also requires having the guts to go back to the drawing board and build a whole new highway system.